By the closure of the pulp and paper mill, rehire the local workers, retrain them.
Advocates rave about the potential of crypto mining. Some provinces are pressing pause on those energy-hungry operations. We'll look at both sides of the debate. But first, flamethrowers, friends, and foreign interference. The House is now in session. The government is feeling a lot of heat on the topic of election meddling. At a news conference on Friday, the Prime Minister was remarkably blunt about it.
If I'm standing here making a housing announcement on how we're going to be building homes for Canadians right across the country, and Canadians aren't even sure if this government is really focused on their best interests or is in the pocket of some foreign government, that's something that needs to be dealt with extraordinarily seriously.
Justin Trudeau argued he's doing that. He also laid a lot of blame at the feet of Pierre Poilievre, and the Conservative leader did not hold back against the Prime Minister either.
All of this points to him covering up the truth because he's afraid that Canadians will find out how he failed to stand up for our interests and instead stood up for his own.
To help guide us through the rhetoric and the reality, I'm joined by Shannon Proudfoot, a reporter with the Globe and Mail, and Stuart Thompson, editor-in-chief of The Hub. Thank you both so much for being here.
Hi there.
It's great to be here.
Okay, I want to start with just how hot the tone has gotten here. Justin Trudeau went on to say that Pierre Poilievre is attacking Canadian institutions with a flamethrower. Mr. Poilievre certainly has not spared the Prime Minister. Shannon, is all this heat warranted?
It is in the sense that this is an issue that really matters and probably has tendrils that stretch everywhere, but there's sort of different, I don't know, flavors of flame here or flavors of smoke. Everyone's going to be really hungry. In that, you know, the Prime Minister kind of wouldn't maybe like to pick a lane. He's talking about sort of partisan games as corrosive and unfair here, but then he's also saying there are serious questions about this to which Canadians deserve answers. There is a ground where those two overlap. You know, you can be playing partisan games or you could be actually asking questions that need answers. But either way, I don't think we're making a mountain out of a molehill here at all.
Stuart, what do you think?
Yeah, I think actually there's some truth to it because Poilievre is kind of teetering on this because the Conservative Party in general is trying not to go after Chinese Canadians. They're trying desperately not to be seen as doing that. When Poilievre talks, he says Beijing. They're always very clear. It's
right.
the government.
They never say China. Yes.
They have never mentioned Han Dong, who's one of the MPs named in one of the media reports about this, and they're letting the media do a lot of this stuff. But what that means is when Poilievre is trying to turn up the heat, he's going straight at Trudeau. And you saw some of the comments about Johnston, which were some of them were a little silly. It's because all of the fire has to be sort of dedicated to those partisan shots.
I think we should say maybe two things about that. One is that we want everybody to be responsible in not allowing this to sort of seep into any kind of building prejudice, obviously, against be it Chinese Canadians, Canadians of East Asian descent. But you're right to acknowledge, too, that there's some politics in that, right? That's about sort of making sure that they don't alienate potential voters as well.
Yeah, and I'll just say, too, that I talked to some Conservative candidates during the last election who said they got killed at the doors because of the Conservative platform. So there's two sides of this. One is that, you know, there's nearly 2 million Chinese Canadians they have to worry about. And then also there's this big issue they need to attack the Prime Minister on.
Shannon, so the solution that we have been presented with this week is David Johnston as special rapporteur on this issue, basically taking the decision away from the Prime Minister about what to do about this. Mm-hmm. Is he the right person for this job?
I sort of saw two strains of thought kind of filtering through as the week went on. One was unimpeachable. Great guy, serious sort of history, expertise, not someone who's generated a lot of controversy in the past, who has been sort of very careful, or you could view that as a detriment because he's someone who doesn't tend to want to make waves, and so calling for a public inquiry is its own version of sort of, you know, airing dirty laundry. But also, a lot of people have pointed out, like, you could have made a better choice if what you really wanted was for this to be beyond reproach. I think I heard Chantal Hébert saying, like, who could you have picked besides someone who'd been marooned on Mars for 30 years that the Conservatives wouldn't have flung some mud at? But you still could perhaps have made a better choice than David Johnston with, you know, we've heard about his connections, lifelong family friend of Trudeau, member on the Trudeau Foundation. But he also was sort of, I thought, everyone's most obvious kind of free square on the bingo card pick. So there was a reason that everyone was sort of leaning in that direction.
Stuart, let's talk for a second about that Trudeau Foundation connection. David Johnston is a member of the Trudeau Foundation. which is of course named after Pierre Elliott Trudeau. The Prime Minister is not a part of it anymore, but they have become part of this story when the Globe and Mail reported that they got a donation that ultimately, it appears, came from China, perhaps not realizing it. They've returned the donation. Should the Prime Minister's office have seen that as a big sort of, this is not the right person for the job?
Yeah, it depends on how sort of Machiavellian they were about this, which is that argument is a classic Ottawa politics argument that they're probably fine with us having, because it doesn't really touch on the actual problem of Chinese interference in our elections. So I think they're probably fine with that. One of our writers of Howard England, who's worked in the PMO for Harper and he worked for Jason Kenney, he kind of knows the ins and outs of this stuff. He made a good point, which is that this scandal is sort of based in nomination battles, where, as you guys know as reporters, is where all the real skullduggery happens in our politics. And it's also very opaque. You can't get into that as a reporter, and especially if you're doing some kind of investigation, unless you have some real knowledge of how these things work. Howard suggested maybe an ex-cabinet minister or someone in intelligence to do this, but if you're David Johnston, you've never actually gotten down to that level. You're going to be following a lot of rumors, a lot of accusations, a lot of stuff that doesn't go anywhere, and it's going to be really hard to actually get to the bottom of this scandal. And then the question is, what is the goal here for the PMO? Do they want this just to go away, or do they want to get to the bottom of it?
Perhaps we will find out when we see what David Johnston decides, but all that remains to be seen. All of this, though, is overshadowing what a lot of Canadians are thinking about. Yes, they're thinking about foreign interference, but a lot of them are thinking about paying their bills. We're only a week and a half out from the budget, Shannon. We know that the government is going to focus on affordability, developing the clean economy, and healthcare. What can we say about the pressures the government is facing with this particular budget?
I love this moment about 10 days before the budget, where we get the trailers where they frame up how they want us to see it. And as we know, it's often a sort of a defensive maneuver. It's not necessarily pointing to what's actually there, it's pointing to what they want to sort of buttress or deflect in advance. So we've been told restraint. We don't want to just pour more gasoline on an inflationary economy, but also we know people are hurting. I don't envy the kind of line that the government has to walk, because people are very anxious, very sort of fed up, frustrated. We saw some of that directed in this 2 minutes hate we had last week with the grocery CEOs at the committee, and Jagmeet Singh was having himself a right wonderful time going off on them. So people are stressed about cost of living, and the government has to find some way to both respond substantively to that and also to look empathetic and understanding and not out of touch without further heating up the economy. And so I expect something sort of flat in terms of the general budget. I expect a bit of a sad trombone sound in the form of a budget, because I don't know how else you thread that needle. It's not an easy balance to strike.
I've never heard a budget defined by a single sound effect, but
that's what I'm here for.
Stuart, what are you going to be watching for, given everything Shannon just said?
Yeah, I absolutely agree with Shannon. I think it's a great point that it kind of drives home this idea that this government is not the master of its own destiny right now, in a way that's never really happened to it before, because even, once you put David Johnston in charge of the interference scandal, the folks at the Globe and Mail, where Shannon works, are going to be ahead of David Johnston on this. We already know that. And so this thing will keep coming out. And on the budget, they just have no room to maneuver at all. They're out of ideas. Most of the big stuff that they wanted to do, the stuff that if you talk to Justin Trudeau in 2014, the stuff that he was fired up about is mostly done or didn't work. And also the fiscal situation doesn't allow for anything either. So on top of that, this deal with the NDP, we're going to probably see the next part of this dental plan, and that is going to be a very big number. It's on top of the health transfers the government just negotiated. And then you say, well, what else would Justin Trudeau do now if he had sort of infinite money? And you would probably put pharmacare in there as the last, thing that he would do. I just can't see how that works anymore. They talked last year about pushing up defense spending to the NATO goal of 2% of GDP, and now that is even just a joke. You cannot even do the math on that and keep it even somewhat sane. So, yeah, sad trombone is probably right.
It's really interesting that you mentioned defense spending, because, of course, we are getting a special visitor here in Ottawa next week, right? U.S. President Joe Biden. We know that one thing the Americans have long been seeking under different administrations is some more defense spending from Canada. But, Shannon, first I want to talk about the visit itself. For so long, this question has been coming around to both the administration here in Ottawa and, in the U.S. When is Biden going to visit? When is Biden going to visit? Does he really not like us? What's going on here? What's going on?
It's very neat.
So how important is this visit now that it's actually going to happen?
I mean, I think it's possible, as I just was, to be a bit cynical about, us as sort of eager puppy dogs, like pawing at the pant leg of the United States. I often wonder if the significance of those visits is the same within the PMO or within the White House as it is to us on the outside. Like, was this a snubbing? Was this significant? Or was this just like, stuff happens in life, for example, a pandemic, and things get kind of weird for a few years. But beyond that, there has been a sense that the Biden White House has been sort of benignly disinterested in Canada. Like, just things got, certainly haven't been as hideous as they were during the Trump era, where it was just explosions left and right in every direction for 4 years. But there just isn't this sense of kind of an orientation where both countries are turned towards each other. Now, that could be sort of quasi-domestic in terms of that could be located in what's going on in the U.S. and Canada. The U.S. is preoccupied with its own priorities. It could be a shift on the global stage, which we all know has changed a lot. But there just is this sense to me of like the BFF status being a bit threatened or weakened. So in that sense, it'll be really interesting to see this play out in person. The pageantry of it, there's a sense of sort of stature and excitement and kind of sparkle to a U.S. president visiting. So there's a reason we're all sort of hyped up about it, but it also has some more sort of substantial ballast to it.
Stuart, in terms of action, we know that the U.S. has made some noises. It wants Canada to step up on the issue of Haiti. We know that Canadians are concerned about what is going on with the Safe Third Country Agreement, given the numbers we've been seeing at Roxham Road. Do you think we will see any meaningful progress on issues like that?
Yeah, can I comment on the psychodrama quickly?
Sure.
Because that's the part that I love, is back in the day, I think Barack Obama saw Justin Trudeau, and I think he explicitly said this, as the next progressive voice on the world stage, and kind of, endorsed him and, gave him advice. And I think that the PMO kind of thought that would come back with the Biden administration, and it really, really hasn't. And a lot of it, I think, has to do with China. Biden has been much stronger on China than I think people expected, and especially that, Ottawa expected. So there's a few things like that, and it will be interesting to see if they can hammer this out. The Safe Third Country one is so interesting because it is sort of this sore that Trudeau can't get rid of. He just wants that to go away, this problem of, irregular immigration happening and then every now and then popping up and them having to deal with it. But what it would take is the U.S. renegotiating that deal, and then for some reason they would just take on that problem. I don't think they would unless we anteed up something pretty big. So I would be interested to see how those negotiations go. It's a big ask from Canada to do that. And it does seem like on every item on the agenda, Canada is kind of asking for something. The U.S. is going to have a lot of sway here, and it's just a question of whether Canada wants to actually do these things. Can we actually go to Haiti? Can we actually step up in the world a little bit? Can we be serious about China? That comes down to sort of the disposition of the government, but it's also a question of capacity. Can we actually, if we wanted to, do these things?
A lot to watch for. Some sad trombones, some open wounds. We pick up on your metaphor of
That's the phrase I was going for, and I couldn't get it.
Together into the world's worst Broadway musical.
Thank you so much for coming in and giving us your perspective on all the action in the political world right now.
Thanks. This was fun.
Shannon Proudfoot of the Globe and Mail and Stuart Thompson of The Hub. So where does all of this leave the man who is helping keep the government in power? This week marks 1 year of the NDP Liberal agreement. To talk about whether it's getting results for Canadians and how much longer this deal could last, we reached NDP leader Jagmeet Singh. Mr. Singh, welcome back to the House.
Thank you so much.
Listen, before we get to the specifics, I have got to ask, do you really think you can take like 2+ more years of being asked all the time whether you're going to take down the government?
Yes, but only because in exchange we're getting things like dental care done, where millions of people will be able to look after their teeth, and it's going to be transformative and also save people lots of money.
Okay, we're going to dig into all of that in a moment. I definitely want to ask you about dental care. I want to ask you about pocketbook issues. Your deal with the Liberals says no surprises. That means you've got, I imagine, a pretty decent sense of what is in this budget. When it comes to helping people pay their bills, is it enough to just re-up the kinds of measures we've seen in the past few months? So more money for renters, maybe another GST rebate increase, or do you believe that this budget has to go further than that?
Well, this is what we realize the difference between pushing and forcing government to do what's good for people versus being the ones calling the shots. In the position we have in a minority government, we're really proud that we were able to do those things, and I think those things are important, and we want to see them happen again. So we want to see the GST rebate continued. that was something that was helping people out. We want to expand the dental care. That's going to be helpful and transformative for people's health, but also saving them lots of money, on average about $1,200 per family. And then additional things like a school lunch program we think is an important way to help address the cost of food that keeps on going up. But we know that while these measures will be very important for people, will make a difference in their lives, we know that more is necessary. With mortgage rates going up and the cost of housing going up, we need to do a lot more to tackle housing affordability. So I would say the measures that we're pushing for are concrete, they're real, they're more than the government would have done if we weren't there, but we're forcing them to do these things. But we also need to be very paying close attention to other areas that people are feeling squeezed, and I think housing is the other one that we've got to do more on.
So, as I said, I do want to ask you about dental care in a sec, but just to stay with this thought, if someone is listening at home right now, you're saying, well, if we were in government, we would do more. So the takeaway should be, as you're looking at this next budget, it's not going to be a big sea change in terms of supports to Canadians. It's going to be pretty much status quo.
When we mentioned the idea of no surprises, the one exception to that is the budget. For many reasons, we're not sworn into cabinet, we're not in a coalition, so we don't actually know what's going to be in the budget. We've made it clear what we want, and the government then has to take that and they'll make their decision with it. We've been very forceful and very clear. We want to maintain the supports that are there. We want to expand them. We want to expand our dental care. It's a part of the agreement. But ultimately, it is going to be the government that decides, and we'll, like all Canadians, wait and see what they do.
Now, the Toronto Star, on that note, reported this week that you are getting what you want on at least one condition of your deal, which is dental care. So expanding the program for low-income households so that it includes older teens, seniors, persons living with a disability. Do you think that this is something that voters are going to give your party credit for when people are actually getting that money from the government?
You know, I'm less concerned about the credit. I'm more concerned about people getting their teeth looked after, and I'm concerned about people saving some money, because I know what it feels like to be really worried about the budget and feeling squeezed. I lived through a period of time in my life where we were really struggling financially. I had to take care of my kid brother when I was in university, and I remember what that's like, that fear, that worry, that if I don't work hard enough, I'm not going to be able to put food on the table. So I want to help people. I want to use my power to deliver that. I know that dental care is so clearly connected to our overall health and well-being, and I want to see it expanded, and it's going to be significant. It's the cutoff is for 70,000 or less, so it's going to be significant. Millions of people will be able to get this coverage, and it'll save a lot of money for people and also make them a lot healthier.
Okay, I want to ask you about another big issue, another big thing on the calendar. U.S. President Joe Biden is coming to Ottawa on Thursday. We know the Americans want Canada to step up and do more to stabilize Haiti. Now, Canada's top soldier, General Wayne Eyre, told Reuters this week, in essence, the military doesn't have the capacity right now to lead a mission in Haiti. I want to know whether or not you think it is a problem that we are essentially already at capacity in Canada's military right now.
This has been a question that I've been thinking about a lot. One of the things that I know is a concern, and as a party that's a workers' party, I'm concerned about workers, people that serve in the military, doing the work that we ask them to do without the tools that they need. And so one of the concerns that I've heard around capacity is the fact that we don't have the equipment that our forces need to do their work. So I think that's something we need to address to make sure that we've got the sufficient equipment that's of the right quality and the right capabilities to provide our troops with the supports that they need when they're being assigned different tasks. In terms of Haiti specifically, the other consideration I have is that the Western world hasn't had the best track record of providing support to Haiti in a way that actually benefits the people on the ground. And that's what concerns me deeply. I want to make sure that the support that we provide is really guided by what people on the ground want, what people in Haiti want, in a way that benefits everyday Haitians and doesn't result in a Western government's imposing solutions on Haiti.
I think everyone involved in this situation would acknowledge that that's very complicated, though, because of course there are some people on the ground, and I'm not just talking about the folks purportedly in government, but people who are living through a dire situation, who do want Canada to step up and others who don't, and it's just such disarray right now that it's complex. But I just want to go back to what you were saying about supporting the workers of the Canadian Armed Forces. Does that mean that the NDP would support a substantial increase in military spending, particularly in the next budget?
We would frame it that we would support the armed forces having the equipment that they need to do the work that we ask of them. And that's something that we absolutely support, and something that I've said before, and I stand by it. And having done some tours of the facilities and the equipment that our armed forces have is not up to the task that we assign at them. So that equipment needs to be sufficient for them to do the work we ask of them. So that's the first step. And then beyond that, that would require, I think, a deeper analysis of what is the goal of our forces before we can ascertain what level of increased funding is appropriate.
Okay, before I let you go, I want to ask you about another big political topic, which is this special rapporteur. You have said that a fundamental part of David Johnston's job is to figure out what the Prime Minister knew, when he knew it, and what he did about it. David Johnston has said he's known Justin Trudeau since he was 6. He described him as a good friend and said that their families have been friends for a very long time. Why should a friend of the Trudeau family examine Justin Trudeau's activities?
What I said to respond to any of the critiques that people have, and there are some genuine critiques that people have, the response and the path that will give people the most confidence, and what I've been calling for from the beginning, is a public inquiry. To respond to any critique or any concerns, if there is a forum that is public and that is independent, that has the ability to find out all the answers to all the questions, to ask all the witnesses necessary to provide testimony, and it's done in a way that's public, that shows Canadians the work is being done, that will allay any concerns. In terms of Mr. Johnston specifically, I've said that he is someone that is credible and someone that's shown with his career that he can do work that's nonpartisan. And with the question around the interference, I think what has concerned me the most about it is what Canadians are saying around their concern about elections and whether they want to participate, because there's a lot of apathy already, and then the additional foreign interference makes people even less likely to participate.
So does the friend aspect of this concern you at all?
If there's a public inquiry, I think that'll answer all questions. That will provide any doubts or critiques that people might have with the transparency of a public forum. That will allay those concerns.
The Conservatives say that they're going to put a motion before the House of Commons so that the Prime Minister's top aide, Katie Telford, has to testify at committee about foreign interference. They say it's going to rest on the NDP's shoulders whether this motion passes or fails. What will your party do?
This is a motion that's been recently presented, so we'll take a good look at it. We'll assess it and review it. My remarks up to this point have been that I've seen the committee and the way it's operating is more so a forum for scoring points on each other. The Conservatives are trying to score points on the Liberals. The Liberals are likewise scoring points back on the Conservatives. Both have been implicated in allegations of interference with foreign interference. And so that to me is the wrong use of our resources. The fact that a committee that is being used in a partisan way to score points in something as important as democracy, for me, it just highlights how important it is that we have an independent forum that's public to deal with this, and that's why I maintain that a public inquiry is the right way to go.
So it sounds to me like you're prepared to side with the Liberals on this, that you wouldn't force her to testify.
Well, on this, we haven't made a determination on this particular motion, so I want to make it clear that this is something that we're still reflecting on. I've just so far not been very impressed with the way the Conservatives have been dealing with something of such importance, that they've made it into a circus of partisanship instead of making it about how do we safeguard our elections and our democracy for the future.
Are you still prepared to support this government if you don't get a public inquiry?
We are going to continue to push for a public inquiry, and we do not make decisions around that's not a decision we're making today.
Thank you so much for your time today, Mr. Singh.
Thank you.
NDP leader Jagmeet Singh. When he visits next week, Joe Biden will be the 8th U.S. president to address a joint session of Canada's Parliament. The House took a look back through the archives to see how past commanders-in-chief have chosen to sum up the Canada-U.S. relationship inside the chambers on Parliament Hill. Starting with the first address in 1947 by Harry Truman. See if you recognize all the other voices. I'll give you the answers at the end.
The housing relations for many years did not develop spontaneously. It is compounded of 1 part proximity and 9 parts goodwill and common sense. Your country, my country. Each is a better and stronger and more influential nation because each can rely upon every resource of the other in days of crisis.
Geography has made us neighbors. History has made us friends. Economics has made us partners. And necessity has made us allies. Those whom nature has so joined together, let no man put asunder.
It is time for us to recognize that we have very separate identities, that we have significant differences, and that nobody's interests are furthered when these realities are obscured.
Ours is the world's most remarkable relationship. The Prime Minister said, whether we like it or not. I can tell you that on most days, I like it very, very much.
As we go forward together on that freedom road, let's stay true to the values that make us who we are. Canadians and Americans, allies and friends, now and forever. Thank you very much.
Just 7 U.S. presidents have spoken to MPs and senators inside the parliamentary chambers. Truman, Eisenhower, Kennedy, Nixon, Reagan, Clinton, and Obama. Joe Biden will join that list next week. I'm Catherine Cullen, and you're listening to The House from CBC Radio. You can find news and interviews on our website, cbc.ca/The House. Mining has been a part of Canada for centuries. Coal, potash, diamonds, and now Bitcoin. But this so-called crypto mining is a bit different. There are no shovels in the ground. Instead, it uses large amounts of computing power to create and track virtual currencies. That requires a lot of energy. One Bitcoin transaction uses almost a month's worth of electricity for an average household. A lot of these crypto miners have been flocking to British Columbia. The provincial government is hitting pause. Their publicly owned utility, BC Hydro, has slapped an 18-month moratorium on new cryptocurrency power hookups. Freelance journalist Bob Keating traveled to the BC interior to meet some of these modern-day miners.
A sturdy metal gate and security guard meet me as I pull up to a Bitcoin mine next to the Rocky Mountains. It used to be a sawmill, but now I hear the whir of 9,000 computers. I'm here to meet Dan Roberts, an Australian entrepreneur who, along with his brother, has created one of the largest publicly traded crypto companies in the world, Iris Energy. Iris is registered in Australia and trades on the NASDAQ in New York, but all the heavy computing is done here at this mine in Canal Flats and 2 others like it in northern BC.
Hi, Dan. Hi, Dan. Nice to meet you. Bob, nice to meet you. Start with the first generation megapods.
Dan Roberts spent most of his working life investing in and building traditional infrastructure projects all over the world. Toll roads, bridges, wind farms, and ports. It made him very wealthy, ranking high on the Australian Financial Review's Under 40 Rich list. But Roberts and his brother gave up on tradition and invested big in the Bitcoin basket about 5 years ago.
We actually first bought Bitcoin back in 2013 on the run up to $1,000, and then it crashed to 500, and we thought, oh, this is silly nonsense, magic internet money, and kind of forgot about it for a couple of years. But at that point, we read a lot about monetary history, and it's objectively the best monetary asset that we've ever seen.
The Roberts bought this sawmill and converted it into a Bitcoin mine in 2021. Long metal buildings now run across the property, and thick black cables fed into them through electrical boxes. The site hums constantly, and now looks more like a mini storage than sawmill. The Roberts have invested hundreds of millions of dollars here and at the other 2 BC BC sites, ranking them among Canada's largest Bitcoin miners.
Why Canada? So, first of all, we said, what are the key ingredients you need to run this computing service? Cool temperatures, really important. Stability of law and regulatory jurisdiction, but most importantly, renewable energy.
BC has a ready supply of renewable energy from hydroelectric dams and generating stations. BC Hydro initially welcomed entrepreneurs like these Aussie brothers, but they got so much interest in cryptocurrency projects that in January the province slapped an 18-month hold on new applications. 21 new mines are now in limbo. Iris Energy already has power contracts, so they're not affected by the moratorium. And Roberts maintains what they're doing here is a benefit to power consumers and struggling BC resource towns.
At a provincial level, we believe we're solving some valuable problems. There is an oversupply of electricity in this province.
BC produces so much energy in this corner of the province alone, it sells excess electricity to the US, and the Site C Dam in the north will just add to that capacity. Capacity Dan Roberts thinks should stay in Canada and help create local jobs and bolster the high-tech sector.
And we can build a whole industry around this. We can go into those regional towns that have been decimated by the closure of the pulp and paper mill, rehire the local workers, retrain them, deliver all these benefits back into the community.
So these fans that you can see above the filter banks, they're actually recirculating some of the output heat from the hot aisle in there.
While Canada has become a Bitcoin leader, polls suggest most Canadians have only a passing knowledge of what the Roberts and other miners like them do, or how cryptocurrency has the potential to change world finance.
Let's talk about the speed with which we are watching this market deteriorate.
NASDAQ, everything and more has been completely wiped out. It was the worst day on Wall Street since the crash of 1987.
If you were to pick an origin date for crypto, it'd be 2008. The inventor of Bitcoin picked the collapse of world markets to launch an alternative way of doing business. Bitcoin was created to enable financial transactions without relying on banks or governments. Instead, cryptocurrency transactions are logged and verified by users in the system in a public ledger called the blockchain. That's what those bunkers full of computers at crypto mines are doing, verifying and processing transactions, which builds the blockchain, which in turn unlocks new bitcoins. Crypto mining takes energy, but instead of blood and sweat of miners, it's the energy of thousands of computers running off electricity. Some environmentalists and politicians are concerned about this energy consumption, like U.S. Senator Elizabeth Warren speaking to an American Senate Bank Committee last June.
Cryptocurrencies like Bitcoin are terrible for the environment. And that would be true regardless of whether we were getting anything productive out of that energy usage or not. The fact that we're not makes it even more scandalous. One of the easiest and least disruptive things we can do to address the climate crisis is crack down on environmentally wasteful cryptocurrencies, and now is the time to do it.
Concerns like these are part of why hydro-rich provinces are pushing pause and taking stock. Manitoba has temporarily suspended new power hookups just like BC. Quebec has gone so far as to put a cap on how much power crypto companies can buy. But while provincial governments put the brakes on, some have embraced the new currency.
We're going to buy this shawarma with this Bitcoin. You ready?